Hey, what's up? It's Chris, the Drone Geek. And on today's episode of Let's Talk Drones, we're going to be reviewing this guy right here, the GEPRC Cinelog 35. An altered review from what I had planned. I'm going to try to not die in the middle of this video review. So, without further ado, let's talk drones. Few things I think are important for you to know at the beginning of this review. First and foremost, last week I got very busy with personal projects as well as projects for Drone Geek Productions and the droning company. Next thing you need to know is that on a few of the days that I had planned to fly, the wind was way out of control, and for a cinewhoop style flight, wind is not a friendly thing to deal with. So that limited my opportunity for flying this out in the field and doing a portion of this review out in the field in real time. And the last thing is, around Friday night, Saturday morning, I started to feel real sick. So bear with me. You do hear that I probably sound way worse than I normally do. I missed my video last week because I was so busy, and then I didn't get a chance to make it up on the weekend because I started to feel sick. So today's video is a review of the GEPRC Cinelog 35. This is a great little drone from GEPRC. I got it because my business had a need for a cinewhoop drone. The beginning of my ownership of this drone was a little rocky. I had some issues when it came to how this was tuned right out of the box. The inputs were actually backwards. When I would pitch forward, it would actually pitch backward, vice versa. And when I'd roll right, it would actually roll left, and again, vice versa on that as well. So, I went in and I tried to fix it myself using some tutorials from Bardwell, as well as a few other resources on YouTube and the internet, and I just continued messing the drone up. So I sent this over to the guys at Betaflight, and they sent it over to the support team at GEPRC, and they got me figured out real fast. So thank you guys, both from GETFPV as well as GEPRC, for your assistance with this drone. It was very much appreciated. And since then, I've flown it probably 30 times, and I've got a very good handle on this drone and what it's capable of. So let's go ahead and start with a few categories that we talk about before we get into the flight experience. First of all, setup of this drone is very easy. Literally everything comes already put together. Now, the propellers I have on this are not stock. I did get these from GEMFan, but they're essentially the same propeller that comes with this drone. The only difference is these are orange. The ones that came with the drone are like a charcoal or a light gray. It's a different color. Otherwise, performance is exactly the same. So right out of the box, you have your propellers mounted to it. The only thing that you have to do in terms of setup is put this through your DJI assistant. Now, I do have the Nebula Vista HD version of this drone. I don't have the analog version. I am dealing with HD, and it's got a Caddx Vista system on it. So I had to plug this into the DJI assistant for FPV products and register it with DJI. But once I did that, this thing was ready to bind and fly. So setup on this drone gets a 9 out of 10. It is essentially plug and play. As long as you've got a battery and you have your goggles and your remote, you can literally pull this out of the box and almost immediately fly it. Depends on what version you have. If you have analog, it will probably be just that simple unless you want to tune and rate it a little bit. But if you have the HD version, you get the Caddx Vista version. All you have to do is plug it into DJI Virtual Assistant and get it updated. Really simple. 9 out of 10 on setup. Next category we are rating is the binding process. Now, again, I have the HD version of this. So I use the DJI FPV controller version 1 and the DJI FPV goggles. Binding, really easy. The controller, you just have to hit a combination of buttons as per the user manual to put it into bind mode. The goggles, there's a little tiny bind button right below the power port. And for this drone, next to the USB-C port on this drone is the binding button. There it is right there. I always have to turn this around like 3 or 4 times to find it. It's front left, the USB-C port is there, and then right next to that is a tiny little rubber button. And when you press that, it changes the light from green to red to let you know that this drone is in binding mode. Really simple. The only complaint I have is that button is sort of a pain in the ass to get to. You do need like a little Allen wrench or a screwdriver to like jimmy up in there and press the button because it's not super accessible. I know that's a protective reason so that you don't end up bumping the binding button after you crash or something like that or having it break, but it makes the binding process just a little more difficult than it needs to be. So for that reason, we are going to give the binding process on this drone an 8 out of 10. Final pre-flight category is the GoPro mount. Now, this drone is capable of holding the GoPro Hero 10 and 11. It does suffer in flight time a little bit. We'll talk about that in a few minutes, but it is capable of carrying the standard GoPro Hero 10 and 11. It's marketed to only handle the GoPro Hero 10, but it's the same size as the 11. So if you have the GoPro Hero 11, the original one, not the mini, you can attach it to this and put it in the protective case that comes with the GEPRC Cinelog 35 and have absolutely no issues. Now, the thing that I have a problem with on this mount is, first and foremost, it doesn't come standard with the GoPro mount. It actually comes with a different mount. I'm not entirely sure what it's supposed to fit. I don't have a lot of experience with a variety of different action cameras. I've always sort of been team GoPro because I've really loved the ecosystem and the experience that they deliver overall. That being said, and the fact that a lot of FPV pilots do use GoPros, I found it kind of weird that it didn't come with a standard FPV mount for the GoPros. What you have to do is you have to take the mount that they have on off and then replace it with an included GoPro mount. The only problem with this GoPro mount is that it is not necessarily super friendly to mounting this guy right here, the case, the blue and white case that goes around the GoPro Hero 10. I tried to fly my GoPro Hero 8 naked on this thing. I really suffered a casualty with my 8. The front screen, which isn't as advanced as this one, admittedly, this one actually has a video feed on this LCD screen on the front, but the front screen on the 8 took a really hard impact on one of my crashes when I originally started flying this, and it broke the front screen. Now, the rest of the GoPro works fine. It's a pretty hardy little thing, but I thought, you know what, there's no way I'm going to put my 10 in there without the case. And that's what makes it difficult, is the case is 3D printed, so it's sort of like a rubbery material, rubbery substance. So it's not, you would think it'd be pliable, but it's not. It's really actually kind of hard to slide it in and out of the mount. It's even harder to slide the GoPro in and out. Once you break it in a little bit, it gets easier. But I think they could have delivered a better experience overall with the GoPro setup on their drone, especially since GoPro is one of the more popular FPV camera platforms that people turn to. So for that reason, the GoPro mount, while it's not terrible, it's not great either, is going to get a 6 out of 10. Next up, we have our flight category. We have a few subcategories in this category. That's going to be handling, speed, acrobatics, and range/penetration. Now, let's go ahead and start with handling. This drone has fantastic handling. It delivers the cinewhoop experience. I have had no issues with this responsiveness-wise since I got it out of the box. When I got it out of the box, like I said, the inputs were backwards, so I did have some issues there. But once I had it straightened out, this has been an absolute dream to fly. It's just so smooth, and it turns just how you need it to. It delivers that cinematic, silky smooth footage feel that you want from a cinewhoop drone. So, I mean, handling, you got to give it an 8 out of 10. When it comes to speed, again, this is a really zippy little drone, especially for a cinewhoop. Now, we talked about cinewhoops and wind. They don't handle wind well. It's not a great drone to fly when it's windy because if you know anything about cinewhoops, and this is true for this guy as well, they are like kites when it's windy. And what I mean by that is when you fly a drone, any drone, when you're trying to move it forward, you pitch it forward. And when you pitch it forward, if you didn't know, you take your drone from this level plane and you tilt it forward like this. When you are flying a manual cinewhoop drone and you want to fly forward or backward, you have to open the face of the drone to get that movement, to get that momentum in the direction you want to go. And when you do that, you open the face of the drone like that, you're actually creating a larger surface area for wind resistance to push the drone around. So, that being said, despite the wind resistance that a cinewhoop usually deals with when you start to pitch it forward more and more extreme, this is extremely zippy. It is marketed by GEPRC as a great go-between for cinewhoop pilots and FPV pilots, freestyle pilots, I should say. That is very, very true. I don't have a lot of experience flying freestyle or cinewhoop, just about a year now at this point. But I will say I'm really, really impressed at the characteristics this drone shows. I truly think it does deliver a hybrid experience between freestyle and cinewhoop. Now, the rating it's going to get for speed is an 8 out of 10. And that is considering it is a cinewhoop drone through and through, because it does lean more towards cinewhoop in that hybrid spectrum. But saying that it has an 8 out of 10 in both handling and speed, you would think this drone is going to be super acrobatic as well. That's where this suffers. This is not a super acrobatic drone. I've done rolls, I've done loops, I've done some basic acrobatic maneuvers with this drone, but it is not something that handles it well. Again, that surface area picks up a lot of drag with the wind and the air resistance, and it makes it hard for it to really gracefully pull off some of those maneuvers. So this isn't designed to fly that way though. So I don't want to be too harsh on it. It is capable of some acro maneuvers, but it's just, this is not the type of drone that you fly that way. It's a cinewhoop drone. It is not a freestyle drone. Even though it has characteristics of freestyle, it's not built for that. So I'm not going to be too harsh on the score here. I am going to give it a 6 out of 10 on acrobatic maneuvering. It's okay, but it's not great. It doesn't deliver the acrobatic maneuvers or the acro experience that you'd be looking for as a freestyle pilot. But again, reminder, that's not what this is built for. So 6 out of 10 on acrobatics. Last subcategory is range and penetration. And admittedly, I have not been able to put this through the paces that it needs to be put through for range and penetration. What I will say though, is that the opportunities I've had to fly at a longer distance, I've seen this drone drop out pretty quickly. Now, when you're talking about the difference between analog and HD, analog drones tend to do better with penetration and range because those frequencies move through the airspace a little bit easier and work around and through objects a little bit easier than HD frequencies do, which is what I'm flying here, again, as a reminder. The HD frequency on this drone doesn't deliver a superb experience. Now, as of the recording of this drone, the DJI O3 Air unit was just released, or at least announced. I don't know for sure, but essentially the O3 Air unit is coming. I'd be interested to see what that does for this drone. Got to keep in mind that the Air unit is the one that transmits that signal. It's not necessarily the drone itself. There are a lot of different parts from a lot of different manufacturers in this drone. So we have to keep that in mind as well. But range and penetration, it's really not great, but in the application that you're going to be flying it most often, you don't need it to have superb range and penetration. You're usually going to be pretty close to this drone when you're flying it. The only application that I will say you could suffer is if you're doing indoor flight, a fly through of a facility that's very, very large. If you're in that type of a position, you could really be upset with the lack of penetration on the signal because it may lose signal if you get farther and farther away within the scheme of the building. So for that reason, we give a 6 out of 10 on range and penetration for the GEPRC. We've got 3 intangible categories here that I want to go over, and I call them intangibles because it's not necessarily the fault of GEPRC of any shortcomings on these, and it's also not to their credit of anything that exceeds expectations because they didn't manufacture the parts that I'm going to be talking about and how they influence the experience with this drone. They just built them into their platform. First and foremost, flight time. That is almost solely dictated by 2 things. 1, the strength of our batteries, and 2, the payload on top of the drone. Now, there are other things that play into it. I'm not going to get into all of that. There are some flight efficiency things that your drone can have in terms of propellers and motor strength, things like that. But largely, depending upon the strength of your battery and the size of your payload on your drone, that's going to dictate a lot of your flight time. And when we have the GoPro Hero 10 on the drone and we're flying with the 1000 milliamp hour batteries that I got from Ovonic, I usually get anywhere between 7 and 8 minutes of flight time, which isn't bad. I mean, for an FPV drone, it's actually pretty decent flight time. If I were to take this and make it an 11 mini, or if I were to make it an Insta360 camera, something, one of those like little like bean shaped cameras, I may actually get up into like 10 minutes. It'd be very interesting to see and be able to play with further the battery life on this. But with the current setup that I have, the 1000 milliamp batteries and the GoPro Hero 10, I get about 7 to 8 minutes of flight time. So pretty decent battery life on this drone. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. When I do change this out, I have 2 different types of batteries. They're both 6S batteries, but when I change out from the 1000 milliamp hour battery from Ovonic and I change to my 850 milliamp hour battery from Lumineer, I do see about a minute and a half flight time difference. I end up getting less flight time with those batteries, just ever so slightly, but it's enough to be noticeable. So again, battery life on this drone, 7 out of 10 with my setup. The next intangible we're going to cover is the camera. Now, we do have a Caddx Vista camera on this unit, and it delivers a fairly decent image. It is HD, so it is going to be obviously a little bit more sharp and detailed than what you'd get from an analog drone. This camera has a few different color and light profiles on it to make it easy to fly in just about any setting. It'll lighten up or darken the image, add contrast, remove it. It's very, very simple. It's not as complicated as I'm making it sound, but you're able to change the picture mode in your goggles by pressing some certain buttons on your controller depending upon your setup. Really, really like the image that comes on this camera. Can I use it for anything professionally? No, obviously not. It's an FPV camera. It's only meant to be a video feed, but I still record it because I like to be able to see the quality of the camera, and I like to keep those files as a record too. The camera quality on the FPV camera, the Caddx Vista, delivered an 8 out of 10 for me. I really liked the picture quality. It's pretty good, I gotta say, but definitely not something you would use like in a project. Just, it's a very reliable video visual feed for you to go on while you're flying. The final intangible category is portability. Not a super portable drone. The only thing that I will say that works for it in terms of portability is it's not a huge footprint. I mean, I'm a bigger guy. My hands are a little bit longer than, normal. Yeah, it fits in the palm of my hand pretty nicely. I mean, it's a little bigger than the palm of my hand. But overall, it's not super easily stored. It's not super easily transported anywhere. It's just, portability is not great on this drone, especially for a cinewhoop, which you would hope would have a smaller form factor. But again, it's not necessarily 100% purebred cinewhoop either. It does have some freestyle capabilities and characteristics. So that's to be said as well. So for portability, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. It just doesn't meet my expectations for something that should be pretty easy to pack in a bag and go. The final category is the price. Now, whether you fly analog or HD, that's going to dictate how much you pay for this drone. Analog is a little less expensive. HD is a little more expensive. For this setup, the Caddx Vista, it's the Nebula Vista HD setup on the Cinelog 35 from GEPRC. I paid $419.99, so $420 for this drone, just the drone. Nothing else came with it other than the propellers in the body of the drone itself and all of the guts, of course, to make it fly. I needed to buy the batteries, the goggles, and the controller all separately. So that in mind, $419.99 price on this thing, not too bad, not too unreasonable. So for that, I give the GEPRC Cinelog 35, the HD version, 7 out of 10 on price. Going down through the categories here, we have quite a few to tally up. First and foremost, we went over setup. We gave it a 9 out of 10 on setup. Next was binding, where we gave it an 8 out of 10, followed by the GoPro mount, which we gave a 6 out of 10. We then went over the flight characteristics of this drone with a few subcategories, including handling, speed, acrobatics, and range. Now for handling, we gave it an 8 out of 10. We also gave speed an 8 out of 10. It's where we saw range and acrobatics come in that dropped that score a little bit. We gave it a 6 out of 10 in both acrobatics and range. Now, moving on to the intangibles category, we have a few subcategories here as well. We covered battery life, the camera performance, and portability of this drone. Battery life scored a 7 out of 10, the camera scored an 8 out of 10, and portability scored abysmal 4 out of 10. And our final category is price at $419.99. This drone scored a 7 out of 10. When you average those all up, you roughly get a 7 out of 10 total score for the GEPRC Cinelog 35. My closing thoughts on this drone are this. If you're somebody that flies freestyle and you want to add a cinewhoop platform to your fleet, this is a great starter for you because it's got a lot of characteristics that a freestyle drone has, but it delivers it in a cinewhoop platform. If you're a beginner and you want to learn how to fly manual drones, but you don't want to buy a DJI product like the DJI FPV or the DJI Avata, you'd like to get into something that's pretty easy to set up and you can just sort of get in the air as quickly as possible, this is a great solution for you. Twofold. First and foremost, the setup and binding is really, really easy. It's simple, straightforward, not a lot to it. So if you're really just brand new to the idea of flying manual custom FPV drones, this is a great solution. It comes pre-built. You just pull it out of the box and you go for the most part. The second reason is it does have duck guards on it. Now, If you're wanting to fly freestyle, you're gonna not have the option for duck guards because traditionally freestyle drones don't have duck guards. They're supposed to be a little bit more agile and acrobatic and be able to do some crazy maneuvers, and duck guards can sometimes limit the performance in that capacity. But what they do is they offer you a level of protection. You're not going to hit something so hard and see catastrophic damage to the drone necessarily. If you're a beginner, highly recommend this drone. If you're looking to get into manual styles of flight and you're either done with the simulators on your computer or your phone, or you just don't want to do them. Although I do recommend that you at least jump into one simulator before you start flying the real deal. I really like this drone. It'll be a drone that I keep in my arsenal for a very long time. I have used this for a few commercial jobs at this point. I intend on using it more in the future. Just need to find the opportunities for it. It's very reliable. It works well with my DJI controller and goggles setup. Just really overall, 7 out of 10 is a well-earned score. Really happy with this drone and the purchase I made. So GEPRC, thank you so much for delivering a consistent and reliable platform. This is an awesome drone. If you're interested in buying this, I have the link for the GETFPV site down below where you can go and actually purchase this drone. If you liked this video and you found it helpful in your search for the perfect cinewhoop platform for you, give me a thumbs up down below by clicking that like button. Helps me out a lot, gets this video out into the algorithm so more people like you that have questions about cinewhoop drones and what might be best for you can find it and evaluate it for themselves. If you really love drone content, drone videos about drones, by drones, and for drones, this is the channel for you. I promise. Hit that subscribe button. Helps me out a ton, helps grow the Drone Geek army more and more and more, and helps us get one step closer to monetization, which means we can start to inject money back into the channel and do cooler and cooler stuff as we go. And if you really love drone content and you love the stuff that I produce, hit that bell icon. You get a notification every time I post a new video, so make sure you hit it. Second reminder, hit that subscribe button. And until next time, I'm Chris the Drone Geek, and I am out of here.